All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Getting a little deeper in the gathering storm. We're starting with looks like Swan and the White Tower stuff, the little tower, and we'll see how far we can get. Oh, I
Yeah,
forgot to bring up
and
comments, so talk while I do that.
yeah, when you texted me that you were about ready to go, I thought, oh, good timing, because I just made it to chapter 13, which is a Gawyn chapter, and I didn't want to read it, but I took one for the team and I went ahead and read it because I said we wanted to try and make good time after the prologue. So let's see if we can get through chapters 8 to 13 here. I don't have a ton of notes on them. There's some big picture things for most of the chapters, and then a few particulars that I want to look at. And I'm wearing my I Miss Abe shirt that I got at the Lincoln Library in Springfield, Illinois, which is a great place to visit. Uh, if you ever want to go on a tour of the Midwest or go see some fun Americana, uh, it's a really interesting place. Uh, and there's some interesting thoughts on leadership here because we see the different styles. We see Siuan and Brine in the first chapter, and we see Siuan kind of thinking about leadership and where she used to be and what she used to be and how she has to do things now. And then we see a Egwene, and then of course we see Rand from the outsider's perspective, and then we see eventually we see Gawyn, who's leading the younglings, but is a moron. So we get all these different thoughts here. Um, Comments.
There's just one. Oh, where's this other one from? There's just one from the last Wheel of Time video.
Okay.
And it was it was from our spoiler section, so I guess I'll hold that till the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I have a few spoilery thoughts with where things are kind of going here. Um, Chapter 8, I thought, reading back through it, um, this seemed to me to be a really good chapter for both Siuan and Brine, as far as, you know, giving their characters time, giving their characters development, and I suspect that it's a good blend of both Sanderson and Jordan. My suspicion is that there were a lot of notes for what's happening here, and I think these voices were easier for Sanderson to find, among others. And it's maybe slightly insulting, but one of the last thoughts I had before we started recording was chapter 13 going, I think
Wait, hold
Sanderson
hold
really
on
gets
on
Gawyn.
the ho- hold
So
on the comments because for some reason under the video itself it's showing one, but there's two here from Scott.
that's weird.
Yeah, so under our notifications, there's another one that's not showing up under the video, which is weird because usually it's the other way around. We get more comments under the video than we do in the notifications. But he said something to the extent of Tavern pull on and affect the pattern, but they are also more tightly tied to the
Hmm.
wheel, which is something we were talking about in depth. For them, it's a sort of pull you push me kind of thing. Yeah, I think that's part of the kind of the yin yang uh ideal around he must have deleted or something because if I click on the comment, it's gone. I don't know. YouTube is not the most user-friendly interface sometimes.
Yeah,
Uh,
imagine that.
but yeah, it's I mean one of the themes. That's why the dragon flag, the full Aes Sedai flag is the yin yang, right? It's that push pull, it's that sticky hands kind of training, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's just the
Um,
Ta'veren are the ones whose hands are actually touching.
where in the Sam Hill Arzar? Um, best I can do is, yeah. Good
We
old Luce Theron.
we also got a comment from the ideals are isomorphic from way back, episode 152. He said he just finished Lord of Chaos. He really likes Mazrim Tame and everything he had to do with the Black Tower. He likes the dynamic between the two. Oh, it's gonna get fun for you. So when you get to this episode, you probably already know more by
Yeah,
now.
Taim's is Jordan is so good at introducing characters and really making them appear as fully fledged human beings.
Well, and
And
there's
Taim
something
is a
to be
great
said
example of
about
that.
any series, whether it's film or book or graphic novel or whatever, that actually has engaging bad guys.
Mm,
Dr. Evil's fun in the Austin Powers series, but he's a caricature
yeah,
of the
yeah,
not fun evil people in serious movies, right?
right.
So, but someone like Taim, he actually is somebody that you're like, is he just a bad dude who's going to do good things, or is he a
Hmm.
bad guy? So all the Forsaken, for the most part, the Forsaken are very well fleshed out as characters, not caricatures. And
Yeah. Um,
even someone that was realistically to his effect on the world, he did more than the average Dark Friend, but he still was an ant compared to the real baddies. Carradine was really well fleshed out. And
yeah,
you get to the point where he's reaching his demise, and you're kind of like, well, dude, he didn't deserve that.
yeah,
He's a bad dude, but he should be killed by the good guys.
yeah. Things get so bad for him, you start to almost feel sorry for him, but really you're feeling sorry for what's happening to his family, that what he's brought upon them through his evil acts.
Well, even when
Um,
they're killing him with the brandy, I'm like, you're a bad guy. The good guys should be killing you. You shouldn't be
yeah,
punished
yeah.
by your own side. You did a lot of good things for them. You laid it on the line.
Um,
I thought of him because the header for this chapter is the rats, and we really start getting that theme of the vermin taking over with his storyline in Tanchico, or
mhm.
is it Ubudar? Tanchico, right?
Yeah, Tanchico, I think
Yeah.
is yeah, because he's in on all that. Um, all right, so um, chapter 8 opens with Siuan and Lelaine, and you get some good, political machinations there, and it's nice being from Siuan's point of view. So you see you see her thinking, you see her quick reacting, and you see the way she's able to play Lelaine and Ramonda off against each other, still worried about making sure that Egwene is the one in charge, and Lelaine doesn't assume too much power. But the interesting bit to me is when she gets to Brine, um, because there's this moment on page 145 where um and this is another reason I think this is more of a Sanderson chapter because this seems kind of almost fan service like in a way, because there's some nice callbacks here. When Brian says I have to say, Sawan, that I am surprised. I had assumed that an Aes Sedai would know little of work such as this, but rarely have my uniforms known such a perfect combination of stiffness and comfort. You are to be commended. Way back when this first started, in Fires of Heaven, I think it was, he said something very similar, and she blew up and was like literally throwing things at him. Um, and so it's a great callback to how their relationship has developed and how Sawan has come to know who Brine is, that she thinks uh uh
Well, it's just the next. You could tell just from the next sentence. He kind
mhm,
of tells you here. The thing was from Brian that
yep,
that was an honest and meaningful compliment. Earlier in the
mhm,
relationship, she thought he was being patronizing.
exactly. And it goes on to the reason she knows it is because, and I think Siuan is kind of singularly in this position because she came from such a very low station to the most powerful throne on the continent, and so it I think it's really meaningful to her when she thinks he didn't look down on washwomen or on runner boys. He treated all with equity. A person didn't gain stature in Gareth Bryant's eyes by being a king or queen. One gained stature by keeping to one's oaths and doing one's duty. And that to me just reminded me of Brine as General Lee, as that influence. And there's a couple of great stories about General Lee. Uh, that he always had time for the common soldier. And there's this story that he was riding by a line of Union prisoners. I don't remember which battle it was, and some random Union soldier complained to him that a Confederate soldier had taken his hat. And Lee said, "Do you know who it was?" And he says, "Yes, sir. It was that man there." And Lee made the Confederate give the Union soldier his hat back. Uh, there's another great story that a soldier had been was brought before Lee for some infraction, and he was visibly shaking, he was visibly scared, and Lee says, "You have nothing to fear, you'll get justice here." And the man replied, "I know, sir, that's what I'm afraid of." And those two stories just popped into my head when I read that paragraph, as seeing that influence of where that came from, and uh why he is considered a great captain, and showing that, and instead of telling it, showing that, and not having to do it by showing some brilliant tactical maneuver. He's just showing how sharp his mind is. Same thing a few pages later when he reveals that he doesn't know exactly what's going on, because he doesn't know about Teleron Riyadh, and he might know a little bit about Tara and Griel, but he recognizes every third night you go to bed early wearing that ring you try and hide. Give my regards to the Amarillan.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the uh Siuan is still Siuan, so I love that insufferable man. Wait, he's insufferable for being clever? and then you get another nice callback here that I wonder if it's a bit of fan service from Sanderson, not who's not just the writer but also the fan himself. And I didn't catch this before, but since doing this reread and we read New Spring recently, the mice. She decides that she needs to bring him down a peg, so she's going to put mice in his bed, which is, I believe, what they did to Elida, wasn't it? Wasn't what her and Moraine, or at least tried to do right before they
Ye-
were raised,
Yeah.
was mice in her bed?
Well, I thought it was itching powder powder or
Was it
something.
itching powder? I thought there was a story
There
there
was
about,
an itching powder incident too, but I can't remember
mm,
which one was Elida.
yeah, I seem to recall that there was an when in the discussion of the pranks that her and Moraine pulled, there was an incident where there was mice in someone's bed.
I think you're right. I'm really God, it's so many books ago. It feels like it's so many episodes ago. That's for sure.
Um, then when we get to Egwene, we have we have some moments here of annoying Egwene where she's uh ridiculing Rand and blaming him for everything, specifically about the bonding of the sisters. And I'll get to that more in a minute when we get to Egwene's chapter. But what jumped out to me here was the parallel between um genuine good and noble leaders. That one of the things that Siuan is thinking about is how Spartan Brian's tent is, that that other men and officers in his camp live better than he does. So he does not take liberties with the uh you know the that could come along with command.
Hmm.
He lives a very Spartan life, and his concern is that his soldiers have what they need, and he'll make do. And you get this moment here where um when Siuan is worried about the politics of what Lelaine is doing, and Egwene makes the point, well, good. If she's able to rally support and is able to lead, then that means if I fail, if I'm stilled, killed, executed, whatever, at least there'll be a strong leader. At least there'll be someone that is respected and followed. And so you get good Egwene there after annoying Egwene. Of there's genuine self-sacrifice there. And someday I'm going to have to go on this tangent of in the at the end of the Declaration of Independence, before the signatures, they say we pledge our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. And if you don't know the story of those men, I can't remember the number off the top of my head of how many signatories there were. Go look it up sometimes and see how many of them really did lose everything.
Hmm.
Their lives, the what happened to their families. These were men of means, and many of them had everything they owned looted, pillaged, burned, destroyed. Um, but they meant it when they put their name on that document and said our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. And ah, dang it, I could use one of those. I was actually thinking when I got to chapter 13, I thought, I need a drink. I can't do that because of these new meds. I don't want to pass out during the middle of our recording. Stupid Gawyn. Uh, but that's all I had on chapter 8 there. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I think there's something to be said. You said we get a little bad Egwene and then good Egwene of a grounding force that Swan has become. She's grounded herself with Brian, but she grounds Elaine, or not Elaine, Egwene here.
Mm,
She kind of talks her through it. You do realize that he's the dragon reborn. He doesn't need permission. You do realize the last battle is coming. We should be putting a little bit of the politics aside. And I think that kind of got through to Egwene a little bit
mm-hmm.
in their conversation.
Yeah, that was going to be that's part of my point when we get to Egwene's chapter is the um she should know better because she doesn't realize it, but she's kind of walking a mile in Rand's shoes. And that's where she needs Siuan, because Siuan's already done it.
Hmm.
Siuan, now she wasn't as ham-fisted and as dictatorial as Elida was, but her ultimate plan for Rand wasn't that different. And she learned the hard way, you can't control the pattern. We don't get to dictate how things are going to go. There's too much going on here, and the stakes are too high. And that's basically what she's telling Egwene in her own way. Oh, and only slightly better than Gawyn. Chapter 9, we have a parent chapter, and
And as we start to regress,
yeah,
we built through book 4, and then we regressed, and then we built again, and now we get to regress again.
well, I would say we didn't regress until book 8 for sure, the end of book 7,
Hmm.
because who Perrin was. All right, I feel really dumb now because I've never thought about this. Making the comparison here, how manic he was on the ride back from Dumai's Well, and how that parallels how manic he was when Faye was captured. the same situation there of being separated, of the unknown, of the potential dangers to her. Um, and that parallel there that could have been used to greater effect, except that Perrin seemed to kind of disappear, as we've ranted about before, is the resolution of what happened when Perrin was finally reunited with Fail after Dumai's Well, and then what happens when he goes off on this mission, and it's what is happening here? Why is everything upside down and topsy turvy? And I think Sanderson does a commendable job here of trying to justify the slog, so to speak. And he said he got Perrin. Perrin was the easiest to jump right into. And I think that shows in this chapter because you get quite a bit of stuff here that would have been better suited sprinkled in along the way from Jordan that I think Sanderson was kind of getting the slog and appreciating it more than most of the rest of us were, um, because of his attachment to Perrin, and possibly also because of his technical skill as a writer of seeing maybe where things were going and what Jordan was trying to do more than just the reader reading it for the fun of it. So for instance, one of the things that jumps out at me here is on page 157. And um, this is a big deal and it's kind of a big problem, especially for young love when you're trying to figure out how to grow together. And this is why Para needs to hurry up and get Fail knocked up. Because
Because the
um,
honeymoon phase gets over and you need a mission together.
well, but it's worse than that for Perrin. Um, where is it? All right, it's down at the bottom of page 157. Um, and he's thinking about Fail, you know, thinking about how much he loves her, and he says she held the sum total of his love. She was everything to him. That sounds good when you're in the romantic phase and you're writing poetry and you're trying to woo your woman. If that's true, that's actually a bad thing.
That is a bad thing because you become blind to everything else in the world.
Hmm.
And this is like everything we talk about, religious fervor or political fervor or anything. It creates what it does is it creates a two-person in group and everybody else is out of it.
Hmm.
Everybody who looks at her funny is suspect.
Hmm.
Everybody who says a cross word to her is the bad guy or the bad girl. And it's the epitome of very narrow-minded tribalism. It's the us against the world kind of mentality that is so romantic in movies, but it's not very social.
It's also why, continuing along here, it's why he feels the way he feels, but he doesn't understand it. It's because he is so um emotionally bound up that he had succeeded. He'd saved her. So why did he feel as if things were nearly as bad as they had been? He should,
I can tell you why from a real life standpoint.
yeah.
It's
So,
because we have a mismatch here. He
mm,
feels that way about her, but we know from her perspectives in the last book, she does not feel that way about him. She loves him,
mhm.
but she does not feel the same way about him.
She has a much healthier. She has a much she has a much more mature um emotional connection to him.
Well, what he doesn't realize is he's actually confusing love for jealousy here.
Hmm. Yeah. So and this is why I say I think Sanderson gets it and does a decent job of trying to, you know, rehabilitate the slog. So continuing on, he should rejoice, he should be ecstatic, should be relieved. He'd worried so much about her during her captivity, and yet now, with her safety secure, everything still felt wrong, somehow, in ways he couldn't explain. Light. Would nothing just work as it was supposed to? He reached down for his pocket, wanting to finger the knotted cord he'd once carried there, but he'd thrown that away. Stop it, he thought. She's back. We can go back to the way it was before. Can't we? And and this is where I was curious about your thoughts is to me, I don't know any other way to describe this from the lay perspective other than a kind of PTSD that the stress and the trauma of the 40 something days of her in captivity and him living inside his head the way he did and being so manic. And then you compound that with something he thinks about in this passage as well, which is the unknown and the unspoken, the suspicion of what she might have had to endure. And that he thinks to himself, he says to himself, none of that mattered. She can't be blamed for what might have happened to her when she was a captive. Well, you can say that, but it's still going to eat at you.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially this is where transparency comes in open and honest relationships. Sometimes they end it because you have to say something that the other person can't take. But in this case, the fact that he is suspecting something and she's not open about it is what's eating at the relationship. I mean, she could actually tell the truth because she never did anything wrong
Mm-hmm.
with Roland.
But as we discussed when we were
As
talking about the
he
Roland
well
stuff,
as he would get it.
as
She
he
never
would,
as he would she
mm-hmm.
never did anything physical with Roland. Now in her mind, she cheated on Perrin.
But she feels guilty because of the feelings.
Mhm.
Also, I think, and I don't remember if we get some Fael perspectives later. I think she worries that he would feel guilty for killing him if she told the full truth about Roland, that he was something of an ally, he was something of a
But
helper.
but that's where words come into play because she could tell a story of an ideal that took care of her
Mm-hmm.
and never say it was the guy he killed.
That's a good point.
It was just somebody who probably died in that battle.
Mm-hmm.
She could say, I'm sure he's dead from that battle. And it still never say it was the guy Perrin killed.
Yeah, yeah. Um. All right, but then we get some.
Again, we haven't used this word in many, many books, but cross-sex mind reading is the problem with all
Uh-huh.
relationships.
Yep.
She's thinking like her, he's thinking like him, and they cannot communicate.
Yeah. Um. We also get that here in a little bit when we get an Aviendha chapter, which is funny because you get both cross-sex and cross-cultural mind reading.
Which is
Um,
always wonderful.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Uh, so so here in these next several pages, much like we just got good Egwene, bad Egwene, we get good Perrin, bad Perrin here. Um, because while he's going through and he's got all these people coming to him. He's got a line of people that all have requests and things that they need to talk to him about, and he has this thought that uh they most of these people knew what he was going to say or knew what to do themselves. Uh, quote, but they needed to hear those answers from him. he understands that. He understood that a while ago. This was one of the problems with the slog is we needed more showing of this and not telling of this.
I think this is for the next book, but is it time to use this one yet?
Not quite.
Yeah, I think it's one more when he gets to the Wolf Dream
I
stuff
think it's
again.
more
Yeah.
when he gets to what's going to happen next. I think this is actually Sanderson trying to um recuperate, but it's still a bit of a slog because we're still basically revisiting what he went through when he first became a leader at the end of book 4. And then when we see him again in book 6, he still doesn't really like it. He's still not comfortable with it, but he recognizes that he is the leader and he's giving orders to his people.
Well, Sanderson does try to come in and give because remember I made a comment last time about how Rand's story, even though it gets annoying at times, never becomes a slog because there's always a new degree of evil. It's like gaining a
Mm-hmm,
level in a game, right?
mm-hmm,
You're like, how
mm-hmm.
can it get any worse? And then it gets worse. And then it's a different kind of worse. And it keeps
Mm,
going. I think Sanderson tried to do that here, but with one of my complaints about the books as a whole since book 5 is that the numbers just get unreasonable.
yeah.
And he makes a comment at the beginning, 156, I believe it is. Let me find the exact one. He's talking about the refugees. There were over
Mm,
100,000 of them. So the fourth paragraph of 156. Refugees, there were over 100,000 of those to care for. 100,000 light. That was more than that lived in the entire two rivers. The numbers are just getting so big.
yeah.
And if you take that into account and you kind of blow up that sentence for the rest of it, is Perrin is his some of his troubles are because the two rivers was one thing to take care of. Eamon's Field was one thing to take care
Mm,
of, but now he's got an army, two other armies attached to that army, and 100,000
right.
refugees
And,
following it.
and if the conflict within him was because of the scale, that would be understandable because that wouldn't be a regression. That would be a compounding of what was already there. That would be,
Well, and you can
a
parallel
slight
him to Rand
change.
here if you were Sanderson.
Hmm.
In yes, the scale is getting so big, and you can make it to where a lot of his problems are his difficulty delegating. I'm having trouble with this person. I'm having trouble with this person. I'm having trouble with this person. And now you can put in troubles with Fail there because wouldn't it be nice if this person who's trained in this could help me?
Hmm. No,
But
exactly.
we're having this strife.
And 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 this setup by Sanderson here gets completely contradicted on page 163 to 164, which is frustrating because you have this great moment with the great mentor of the entire series, Tam,
Hmm.
who we don't get enough, but that's probably why he's so great because when he does show up and he's that soft spoken, you know, uh wise older man who doesn't command, he guides. And so you have this great moment from Tam, but it's also stupidly frustrating because to your point, the scale should be the problem here, not the leadership in and of itself. The idea that he's sick of these banners and he wants to get rid of them, we've already been through that. The Manetherin banner was one thing, but also wanting to throw away the wolf banner and just send everyone back to the two rivers and just be done with it all. If he would have talked about wishing he could do that, about wanting to go back to just,
Hmm.
I just want to tend to farm, I just want to tend to the forge, and Tam being, I know, you know, don't you think I would rather be back at my sheep herd? Don't you think I would, you know, rather be with Rand talking about when am I going to have grandchildren? But You know, the Tam's speech should have been more like that great moment with is it Return of the King? Yeah, Return of the King, where Gandalf is sitting there next to, can't ever remember if it's Merry or Pippin. I can't ever remember which is which. Um, and and he says something to the effect of, I wish I'd never been born to see this, because he's looking out, at Mordor and the
Hmm.
dark clouds, and it's all, of course, very reminiscent here, drawn heavily on Tolkien here. And Gandalf says, well, so do all men who live to see these times. But here we are, and we're going to stand because that's what men do, and that should have been more of the speech
Hmm.
that Tam gave, rather than just kind of contradicting for the sake of drama.
Yeah, and I think maybe something that just didn't come out, and if I might be overthinking to pull it in here, but we get the same problem that Rand had with Perrin here. Two sides of the coin. They're both being swept along by being Ta'veren,
Mm-hmm.
but Rand is taking it in this almost a stoic way of, well, what can I do? I envy those that have a choice, but I'm a sword. And Perrin is throwing a fit like a child
Mm-hmm.
about it. So it's maybe we're supposed to get the contrast. It just didn't come through very well. I don't know.
Well, so on
Which is
160,
funny because in the first 10 books, Perrin was the opposite of a child, or the first 7 books or so. Perrin was the opposite of a child
yes,
of
yes.
that group.
Well, and we had just gone through, this scene where Perrin thinks about how, you know, he likes to think things through, and that he kind of thinks it's funny that now people think, because he's quiet and he's thinking, that people now think he's this scheming, clever Machiavellian type guy, and all he's doing is just trying to think things through. And now, instead of thinking things through, he's, as it says, he's saying, you know he's being stubborn. And Tam says on page 164, uh I thought you were over this. um
Is what all us fans wanted to say through the whole slog.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it would have made it, the slog would have been much more redemptive here, if instead of "nothing has changed from the days before Fael was taken," it should have been a resignation. There should have been a moment of thought and of, you know yeah, I just wish it didn't have to be this way.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit on your analysis of not being Machiavellian, because what is thinking things through other than scheming?
Yeah.
And what we get from a few pages before that you brought up, it's all about Fail, and she is the sum total of everything for me,
Hmm.
which is a pretty blunt statement for self-interest. And the
Yeah.
definition of a Machiavellian type is scheming for self-interest. And not thinking about the last battle and not knowing that you have a part in it at this point. How could you not know you have a part in it at this point? And not knowing that you have influence over these people that need to be fighting this battle
I just
is
had
very
another thought.
self-interested.
I just had another thought here too, of this would have been another great moment, similar to a moment we get with Rand and Tam way at the end of the a series. This would have been a great moment for Perrin, and this is someone he could confide in. This is someone he trusts. He could confide in Tam that, okay, well, I thought you were over this. What he says there is wrong, like character wise. That's not good writing. Nothing has changed since fail. Actually, everything has changed,
Mm-hmm.
because you are now terrified of losing her again. And remember, this is where Tam could be the mentor, the wise one who's been through this, because Tam has lost a wife.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been a great character moment for them both, of I can't risk losing her again. And Tam, you know, guiding him through of, I've been this before. You're not the only one to have feel this way. You're not the only one to have to go through this. And this is how you deal with it. This is what life gives you, and this is how you have to deal with it.
Well, can I do a personal anecdote on this?
Hmm.
We've talked about it's not a wife, it's a son here. But we've talked about the Grand Canyon incident before, where he almost stepped off a cliff, and I almost died trying to keep him from going off a cliff. And that actually, I had to do some self-reflection on this because after that moment, his lack of awareness of his surroundings and all of these things that go into it, I got overprotective for a while. When it came to risk-taking behavior, I kind of started to become a little bit of a helicopter parent while I preach about not being a helicopter parent. And I had to, there were, I can't remember what moment it was that clicked it for me. I'm like, whoa, oh, I remember what it was. We were at a Canyon Lake and there were some kids jumping off one of the high rocks into the water, which is probably about 15 feet. Nothing too scary, but you could still get hurt if something was amiss. And we were walking from an angle that the sun hit just right that I could see the rock that they were just missing when they were jumping in, but you couldn't see it looking straight down. And then one of the kids was about this close to hitting his tailbone on it on one of the jumps. And Ben was like, I want to jump. And I'm like, there's a huge rock right. And I stopped him. Big mistake. Why did I stop him? Because I was being overprotective. And this seeing the other kid almost get hurt because he wasn't aware when I should have just said, go for it. And I should have gone down there and sat on that rock. I should have let him take that risk-taking behavior with no knowledge of it. All he could see is me sitting on a rock, so he's going to jump over me. That would have been the better approach. Yeah, I still protected him, but he didn't know it. And what these kids these days aren't getting is risk-taking behavior. That's why they become delinquents, because that's a kid acting out, trying to take risks. If you can't take risks in a legal way, you're going to do something illegal. That's what boys do. And it was that almost losing him that time that triggered me to go in that direction, even though it's against my character as a person. Perrin, almost losing her, is against the character we have. I just don't, we just, as we're talking about here, I just don't think that part of it was very well written. I think you could have written dissonance in there a lot better than that, where he's just being
Yeah.
overprotective.
And same thing here with my last thought, 166, 167 at the end of this chapter. Um, I think Sanderson here sums up the entire slog and why it was a slog. Because we were never really shown this. This is the missing piece, I feel, for why Perrin was acting the way he was acting. And we're finally told. And in hindsight, I'm trying to think back, and I don't see it. There should have been more, there should have been more of this in Jordan's writing itself, which is his lack of purpose. When in in the first three books, he had a purpose. There was a quest. There was something going on. In the Shadow Rising, he went back to the Two Rivers to do a specific thing, and then that plan changed. So, but then he had a new plan. There was a specific goal he was trying to accomplish. Then same thing in Lord of Chaos. He had specific things he was trying to accomplish. Now, when Rand sends him halfway across the continent to do this thing, he's kind of listless. It's not his plan, it's not his goal. Not only does he not know how to accomplish it, he doesn't even know if it's worthy of accomplishing. When you look at Masama and what he is and who he is, and he's supposed to bring this guy into the fold.
Mhm.
So not only is it not his goal, he's not even sure it's a worthy goal. So this whole
Which
time,
actually would have been a good thought and a good
mhm,
storyline because Rand is thinking numbers. Rand is thinking these people
you know,
support me. They're doing bad things, but if we rope them in, we have their numbers and we can control their bad behavior because now they're in the fold. Whereas now the storyline could have been Perrin getting out of there and saying Rand was wrong.
mhm,
Yeah, these numbers exist, but they're rabid dogs at this
yeah,
point.
yeah,
And you could have had and you get a little bit of that storyline, but Fael does it, not Perrin. And he gets the rabid dogs and then figures out how to use them to get back Fael. But this is to circle back to your meaning. This is a mistake so many people make in relationships, and this is why marriages don't work out. They attach meaning to the person. They attach their life trajectory to the person, where the life trajectory should be the path to children, family, home, you know, grandkids, going forward, that stability going forward. The person is someone who helps you along the way. The person who is someone who has like you talked about, similar values, a
mhm,
value train that goes in line. Your value isn't her. Her value isn't you. Y'all have values that you go towards together because you share them. So he's attaching his value to her. Whereas the value at this point, I mean, again, 10 books in, but for them, 4 years of stress and trauma should say the value is last battle win.
mhm,
And she should be the person who compliments him along the way, not his value. That's different. They're
mhm,
two different things. She's the best companion for him along the way, not I am for you.
yeah,
Last battle be
and
damned.
there's a kind of a read and find out bit thing going on here of I to 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 see if this is written out better than I recall, but going forward here, this is what is going to shape Perrin's storyline in these last three books is all right, he's recognized he lacks purpose. And the chapter ends with him just thinking Rand needed him. That had to be his focus now. Well, that's not enough. That's not any different than Fael is your whole world.
Mm-hmm.
You need something more concrete. You need something that is you. Um, and we had talked about, I know we brought this up, that the reason the slog is a slog is because Perrin is a protagonist that's not driving the action. He's being pushed along by outside forces, and he's not really doing anything. He's not really making decisions, and that makes for a boring story. It's you might not have noticed, but your brain did if you have a movie or novel or whatever where stuff is just happening and the protagonist is just reacting rather than acting.
Yeah, I was going to say he
Boring.
is making choices, but he's making choices in a
And
reactionary fashion,
and
and he's making bad decisions in a
yes,
reactionary fashion.
and you could that still could have worked and not been as much of a slog if there had ever been a moment where parents started to realize that was happening and tried, even if he failed, at least tried to change that.
But instead,
Um,
he doubled down and he justifies his bad decisions because fire.
mhm, yeah. All right. Chapter 10. Um, I don't actually have a single note on this. So I don't know. This is I like that it's Rodel Ituralde's perspective. Um, both from learning what's going on, but then also um it's when Rand shows up, I think it's really good to see Rand because we've been witnessing from the last book and the few chapters so far here the spiral downward is getting faster. And so to see him from someone else's point of view, I think is really telling, and is, you know, helps you see it even more, I think, than being inside Rand's head himself. Um, it's kind of like the outside perspective going, the outsider coming in and saying, "Hey, well, why don't you do this thing like this instead?" And everyone going, "Oh, why didn't we ever think of that?" Because you're inside it and you don't see it. Um, Other than that, I don't really have any thoughts on that chapter, because otherwise it's just stuff happening and it's all cool. But okay, moving along.
Yeah.
Um, oh, the other thing I did note at the very end, a bit of just interesting tidbits there, is that when the way Rand responds to him when he says, "I remember, I remember the Forsaken sometimes better than I do my own life." How open he is about that, how and how readily he admits that. And then the other little tidbit here is he uses the word spin rather than channel. And he had thought before of, he gets scared and he doesn't like it when he uses those terms, because that's how they referred to things in the Age of Legends. You spin weaves rather than channel them. And in that moment, I think you're seeing, from the outside looking in, I think we're seeing the influence of Lews Therin,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I like this better than being inside Rand's head and actually hearing Lews Therin ramble.
Mm-hmm.
Is seeing the effects. All right, chapter 11. This is the Aviendha chapter, so you get cross-sex and cross-cultural mind reading here, which is lovely.
Yeah.
Um,
Now the header on that, we talked about spider webs before, but
mhm.
isn't that just the weave of the pattern?
That might be, yeah, the age lace.
Mm-hmm.
So that yeah, that might be it. When I was thinking it was um
Moghedian.
the spider,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm wondering if that iconography is symbolizing the breaking of the pattern,
Yeah, because it is
the
coming apart.
fraying
Yeah.
of the pattern, which is what happens here. Is you have another one of these weird, bubble of evil nastiness things that happen here, and this one's
Which the
pretty
last
nasty
one
and
we
pretty
had
bad.
was when the bubble of evil in the tower.
Hmm. Yep, yep. So I think that's the iconography here. Um,
Yay, we figured out something somebody in Theory Land probably figured out 20 years ago.
yeah, well, better late than never. Page 182 is my first note here, because this amused me. Is I had I don't know that I've ever really thought about this consciously, uh about self-deprecation and what that means and why we do that. So it's kind of funny to see it from an outsider's perspective. And I think it's written really well here to to make it both interesting and amusing, as well as give you insight to Aviendha and the Aiel, of the two guards complaining to each other, complaining about the weather, complaining about the heat, and Aviendha, you know, uh, not being able to figure this out. Uh, of why would you do that? Is why would you, because she's in the middle of a uh really bad punishment. And so she had just passed the maidens, and the maidens were very purposely not looking at her because that would shame her, right? And she's not looking at the maidens because that would compound her shame. And yet here these wetlanders are just openly complaining about things. And
So,
Uh,
you want me to go into the psychology of self-deprecating humor?
well, let me just set it up here with this passage. Um, did that guard not care that he was losing face in front of his fellow by exposing his weakness? They were all like that, even Elaine. If you listen to her talk about the aches, sicknesses, and frustrations of her pregnancy, you would almost think she was approaching death. However, if complaining was something that Elaine did, then Aviendha refused to accept it as a sign of weakness. Her first sister would not act in such a shameful way. Therefore, there had to be some hidden honor in it. Perhaps the Wetlanders exposed their weakness to their companions as a means of offering friendship and trust. If your friends knew of your weaknesses, it would give them an advantage should you dance the spheres with them. Or perhaps the complaining was a Wetlander way of showing humility, much as the guy Shane showed honor by being subservient. So, honor in complaining. I am very honorable.
Yeah, she's not completely wrong, or I guess Sanderson's not completely wrong in the assessment. It is a humor has always been a tool for social animals. It's because it brings people together, and it shows a little bit of wittiness and intelligence, and displays that. Self-deprecating humor lets the guard down. For women, a lot of times it's, women are a lot more about equity. So it's the the pretty girl saying I'm fat, it's that kind of, I'm putting myself down at the level. I don't want to stand out as the person on top, because that's the woman every woman hates, is the woman on top. So they all try to bring themselves down to an equal level some way or another, and then underneath the surface try to scheme to where they're the top. But that's another story. Men do it as kind of a bonding thing, where it's, I'm showing that I have a thick skin. I can make fun of myself. Nothing you can say can hurt me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can chide at each other. Now, the locker room mentality. If you're the person in the locker room nobody makes fun of, you're the person nobody likes. And if you start the engagement by making fun of yourself, you introduce yourself as to the group as that person that can get along with everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to be butt hurt when they're not the one that gets to stab the woolly mammoth this time, because it's situational, because woolly mammoth does not comply with plan. So with men, it's the showing you're not going to get butt hurt over a situational thing. With women, it's all about creating an equal, don't stand out playing field amongst each other while you scheme underneath to, so partly right. Yeah, it's the humility and all this stuff, but we're in Avienda's point of view, and we're talking about Elaine, who's a political schemer, and we're talking about, it's, with women, it's the don't look at what I'm doing, listen to the words I'm saying kind of thing, which was probably going to get us canceled. But this is the evolutionary psych standpoint on this, and it actually makes sense from a survival standpoint, because that's the way these things worked before we had grocery stores and policemen. But it's uh, yeah, with men, it's a bonding thing, but in a different way than it is with women. And realistically, the thing they get wrong here is, I think it is a little shameful for the women, because it's not honest. Whereas the men, you're advertising the thick skin. I can be part of the
Mm-hmm.
group. Yeah.
Um, Speaking of not honest, there's a very interesting exchange on page 188, which I like the build up inside Avienda's mind. Um, I like the callback to the all the time she spent with Elaine and actually seeing how that has affected her, because you start the chapter with her seeing that she still kind of thinks like a maiden, but she recognizes she has to stop doing that. And this is where her first sister has helped her learn, is she wants to be able to think things through like Elaine. And she's wondering, so she's trying to figure out what's going on with her and the wise ones. And so her thought is, well, how would Elaine approach this? How would Elaine think this through? And
Well, which is goes back to what I just said, because she's a very masculine female.
mhm,
And in battle, you can't be jealous of the person who did this action when it was your turn.
mhm.
Whereas in politics, it's all about making things happen the way you want them to happen.
And exactly. And so Mullane asks her what Aviendha thinks about this plan to kidnap the Domini merchant chiefs in order to set them up and try and instill, some order in Arad Doman. Um, His plan seems a good one, wise one. Yet the spears do not like being used for kidnapping. I think the Karakaran should have spoken in terms of offering protection, force protection for the merchants. The chiefs would have responded better to being told they were protecting rather than kidnapping. They would be doing the very same thing no matter what you called it. But what you call a thing is important, Aviendha said. It is not dishonest if both definitions are true. That is a very political statement. That is
Yes, it
very
is.
different from the black and white world that Aviendha used to live in, and part of her still wants to live in.
Well, wouldn't you?
Yep.
Fear of the unknown is probably one of the strongest anxiety builders that we have, which definition of anxiety, right? Whereas in battle, in these raids and in her previous life, even navigating the waste, the known unknowns were outnumbered than the unknown knowns.
Mm-hmm.
So I know these dangers are out here and I know how to find them. I just don't know where they are, but I know the signs situationally. That's the known unknowns. Whereas the unknown knowns are someone's out to get me and there are people politically scheming, but I have no idea who they are. I don't know
Yeah.
what signs to look for.
Those
They could be my best friend.
exactly.
They could be this. Yeah,
Well,
that's a lot harder to deal with.
just in this statement. So she's used to, and she would rather be dealing with dangers that are all very tangible. That as a warrior, all of her dangers were very tangible. This statement is very dangerous because there's wisdom in that, but there's danger in that because you have to be careful that remains a paradox and does not become a contradiction, does not become an oxymoron.
Why are we more
Because
scared of snakes than bears? Death by a bear would be much more painful than by
yeah,
snake, but
yeah,
we're more scared of snakes than bears because the snake that bites you is the one you didn't see.
mm-hmm.
The bear
Stupid
that bites you,
copperheads.
you've had plenty of warning.
Oh
You
yeah,
you probably could have got out of that situation.
stomp, stomp, crunch,
Yeah,
crunch.
yeah.
Whoa, bear. Yeah. Um, and then the other uh thing that jumped out here that I like that I feel like we we never got enough of with Jordan. Um, I guess we saw some of it in the Fires of Heaven when we saw the Aiel Moor and saw them coming together. But on page 189, Avienda makes the point that uh Rand uh let's see, where is it? Um Did Rand al'Thor know how hard the Wise Ones worked behind his back to maintain Aiel loyalty? Probably not. He saw them all as one homogeneous group, sworn to him to be used. That was one of Rand's great weaknesses. He could not see that Aiel, like other people, did not like being used as tools. The clans were far less tightly knit than he believed. Blood feuds had been put aside for him. Couldn't he understand how incredible that was? Couldn't he see how tenuous that alliance continued to be? That is shining a light on something we saw for a while, especially in Fires of Heaven and Lord of Chaos, of the wise ones moving back and forth and talking amongst each other. And Rand's mind, he saw that as scheming against him. And what was just revealed here is that all of that stuff that was happening 5, 6 books ago, that was all for you, dummy.
Well, this is cross-cultural mind reading here. Because the way they describe themselves to him, how could he not think that way?
exactly.
They
And
they they analogize themselves as a spear, and he's just pointing and shooting. That's all
mhm.
he's doing.
And you know, to his defense, the cross sex and cross cultural mind reading, the wise ones were doing that for his benefit, but he saw it as scheming because they were rather openly trying to handle him rather than advise him, right? They did not learn the lesson that Moraine learned. Okay.
Which is kind of a theme of all these things.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other
You need
thoughts
to do
on?
this thing, but you need to do it my way.
So the only other thing really in this chapter that jumps out at me that I was wondering if you had thoughts on is the very end here, um, when uh she's Mullane after the discussion. Mullane is going, all right, you got to be punished some more, and I do like that. We see that there are steps here so that when she finally figures out what's going on, it's not going to come out of the blue. We see that there are steps here of Aviendha side, another round of questions, and another undeserved punishment. There was a correlation of some sort, but what? She was too exhausted to think for now. Blah blah blah. But then the end here is her. Um, I like that we have seen we started off. We see Aviendha the warrior. We see Aviendha the wise one, and now it ends with Aviendha the woman of being tempted with that bond in her head and feeling Rand and wanting to go to him. No, this is the very end of the chapter. No, not until she had her honor back. She would not go to him as a beggar. She would go to him as a woman of honor. Assuming that she could ever figure out what she was doing wrong.
I don't know. I don't know what I can add to what we've already said on this because we
Mm-hmm.
know as the reader what she's doing wrong. She is not okay. So she said correlation. She is not correlating the fact that the punishment is undeserved to the actual lesson.
Mm-hmm.
She's thinking there's a lesson to be learned. So my punishment is deserved. I just don't know what it
Well,
is.
no, I was more focusing on the honor because even before the undeserved punishment,
Well, but
we had
that's the key. She has this skewed. Well, she's missing the point on honor is what they're trying to teach her.
mm-hmm. Okay, I see
Honor,
what you're saying.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The undeserved punishment is actually dishonorable. So because she keeps accepting it, she keeps dishonoring herself.
Mm,
So she's perpetuating the cycle.
good point. All right, chapter 12, Egwene chapter. Um, so the first several pages of this chapter to me is my note was cue the musical training montage, cue the Rocky music, because to me that's what these first several chapters are. It's a kind of series of quick scenes of her interacting with various Aes Sedai and seeing what's going on. We also get uh somewhere in here we get a moment that 4 weeks have passed, a month has gone by since something happened, so we're getting a sense that a lot has been going on, and we're seeing it in kind of montage style here as she goes through a bunch of stuff. Um, and the other just kind of meta thought I had here about what's going on in this chapter is between her trying to assert her authority with the Saladar Aes Sedai, and now her trying to walk this very fine line of I'm still the Amarillan, but I have to be very careful how I act. in order to win these Tower Aes Sedai over, I think, and we'll kind of put a pin in this for
Wait.
later.
I had a video here for Aviendha here. This is what she's
Okay.
doing right here. This is why she's having so much trouble. Let me share screen. I don't think we need sound here. It's just a short. This is what Aviendha is doing in her head. This is why she keeps on the path she is.
uh,
That
uh,
I remembered that video that came across a while ago, and I was like, that's exactly what it is. That's why it's so shameful, because basically she's punishing herself for nothing.
hmm.
It's a useless task. It's a mental useless task where the wise ones gave her physical useless tasks.
And again, the overthinking and things not being accidental. And then it is immediately followed by an Egwene chapter, which is she has made that point several times, and that's what she is attempting to do here is I'm not going to accept what you say because then you'll see me as that. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, and in one of these scenes, she makes that point very explicitly of, you know, especially if the punishment is unjust, you need to make sure that those punishing you remember that, or else they'll start seeing you as lesser.
Well, let's look at the Aiel culture and punishment. The worst punishment is as she described earlier here, and we saw bits of what the dot saying in the other books, is to do physical work that has no purpose. And right now, Avienda is mentally anguished towards no goal. She's being punished towards no goal, where Egwene is accepting punishment. Okay, so let me rephrase. Avienda is accepting punishment with no goal on the other end, where Egwene is accepting punishment because it has a greater goal on the other side of it. That's
Hmm.
the big difference between the two. That's why Egwene is in a good mental space, even though she's being punished, and Avienda is basically ripping herself apart internally because of her punishment. Whereas the Aiel usually handle punishment better because they understand Jito.
Speaking of understanding, back to where I was going with Egwene is um down the road here when Egwene finally confronts Rand in the next book, uh I'm wondering if how she acts there is perhaps influenced by what's going on here, that she doesn't realize it, but she's walking a mile in Rand's shoes because um she thinks here and elsewhere about his temper and about how dictatorial he is. And yet, look what he has to deal with. Look what you're having to deal with. You have all of these things going on, all of these politics, all of these, you know, you're trying to deal with these sitters, and you're making the point, look, somebody has to make the first move here. Somebody has to make the first move, has to swallow a little bit of pride, because the freaking last battle is coming. We can all see it, and we must have a united tower. And she's making this point over and over and over. And that's exactly now Rand's doing it differently because he's a guy. And so he's going to be more dictatorial. He's going to be more aggressive, but they're dealing with the same crap. And she's getting just as frustrated. She just reacts differently because she's a woman. She's also in a weaker position, but still the ultimate problem is still the same, and the ultimate goal is still the same of I need to get these people unified against this greater existential threat. um There's also a moment in here though where once again, and I referenced this from Siuan's point of view, but I want to talk about it here from because it's from Egwene's point of view. As once again she thinks about um the Black Tower's bonding of the Aes Sedai, and she makes a somewhat valid point, which is, look, it doesn't matter if Rand gave a direct order or not. He's ultimately the one in charge, and the leader has to take responsibility for what his people do.
Mm-hmm.
And you set up the Black Tower, and this goes back to last book and Logain
Yeah, I
trying
was
to,
just gonna bring that up.
yeah,
If you didn't,
trying to
yeah.
tell Rand, you got to stop ignoring this because these aren't your people anymore. These are Taim's people. They don't know who the hell you are, and they don't care.
Yeah, which is funny to go back to our Perrin discussion earlier. Perrin can't delegate, and we're not getting a delegating struggle. Rand delegates and then just leaves it alone.
Mm,
And that's one of his weaknesses.
mhm.
He's like, okay, Time, you're going to do this and you're going to do it right. And I'm not going to check up on you. All right, Sea Folk, you're going to do this and you're going to do it right. And I'm not going to check up on you. And it's kind of across the board.
Yeah. But then I had this other thought that I hadn't had before, which, another tick in the column for you and Scott of, you know, Egwene's a jerk. Egwene, the Aes Sedai who are so pissed off about the bonding. Well, wait a minute. Elida sent those Aes Sedai there to destroy the Black Tower, to I don't know that they know the secret orders, but still to still, which is just as good as killing all of the men there.
Mm-hmm.
They can't comprehend. They're all ticked off because they can't comprehend the existential threat because they've never had to live under anything remotely like that, except for Egwene. Egwene should be able to understand the existential threat because she's been collared. So she should understand a male channeler much better than any other Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's ever a connection there that she makes in her own mind. I don't think there's ever an understanding that comes about there. Um, because of that. There's always an antagonistic thought and an antagonistic relationship between in her mind as well as in her actions, both not just with Rand but with other male channelers.
Well, let me bring up something I just brought up, but get us canceled again. Women's strife for equity has nothing to do with men. They want to be equitable to each other and not stand out. They're perfectly happy dominating a man
Hmm.
because they make it a zero-sum game at that point.
That's a good way of, yeah, of that's an interesting contrast because everything I've been talking about here with Egwene, the reason she is succeeding inside the tower is because she recognizes it's not a zero sum game. Now there is a zero sum component, which is it's either me or Elida. We can't go on with two. There's got to be one Amarylline
Mm-hmm.
seat, and she's a disaster. But in the encounters with the the tower Aes Sedai, she's not treating it as a zero sum game. She is treating it uh, as an interaction, not as a conflict. And so she's much more willing and able to have some give and take there. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, which is why the whole sequence from the moment she gets captured and Jordan shows this in Knife of Dreams right off the bat that sometimes it doesn't work and she gets beaten, and sometimes she, gets ignored, and sometimes she leaves someone thinking, there's a good point there. Um, but she's able to do it because it's not zero sum.
Hmm.
But when it comes to her thinking of and her dealings with Rand, has always been zero sum.
It goes back to the relationship thing. If you're battling each other for the ultimate power instead of going just the same direction,
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes a zero sum game.
And I think we can suppose that it was different in the Age of Legends, and that was why there was an Amarilyn and a Tamarilyn. It's not just because there are two halves of the power, but because you need a representative of those two halves. What is the ancient symbol of the
The yin
Aes
yang,
Sedai?
yeah,
The
yin
yin and
yang,
yang.
yeah.
You need that push and pull. You need both of them. You need that feminine and that masculine thought process in order to more likely come out with the best idea, with the best process, with the best result, because it's not just a single train of thought.
And which there's just allusions to it, but they probably had because you can't help at that power level for there not to be a power struggle, but they probably had a system that mitigated it,
Mm-hmm.
like we're supposed to have in the States, the three,
Yeah.
the tripod of the executive, the congressional, and the judicial, right? So they probably had a system with checks and balances that kept one from going over the other. And it again, it's very vague about it, but it's also tells a story that the man made a rash decision at the end, which was bad. But also, it wasn't like the show tries to tell you that the women were the rational ones. The women betrayed the men. So we had two bads. It's Badong, right? To quote
There
Kung Pao, but
there was no yin yang. There was suddenly a hard
there was
line.
there was man going forward
Mm-hmm.
without help, and there was woman that could have helped but betrayed the man. So they were both wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and they were both wrong at the same time, and the ultimate evil ensued, and the breaking of the world happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they plugged evil, but evil won.
Um, I love
Which
the.
that goes back to book two. All the lives Rand went through. Yet
Mm,
she says, and I
I
won.
have won. I
I
won
have
again.
won. I have
Yeah,
won again. So realistically, the sealing of the boar was still a win for the Dark One.
that's a good point. Um, all right, so I love the build up here and the way Egwene um interacts with the various sitters, and then when we get to Maidani, and she asserts her authority. And again, the parallel with Rand is here she is being rather authoritarian, but not wrong because there is a hierarchy here. And Maidani supposedly is one of the Saladar sisters, so you accept my authority or you don't.
So can we say Madani's a diva because she loves the red carpet? Uh,
Giggity.
oof.
Um, I also enjoy the we've seen before, and now we're showing again that Egwene's pretty darn clever here. Is how she's able to suss out that something is going on, and she's kind of able to start putting pieces together until ultimately she's led to the little group in the basement that's hunting the black. Um, and uh, I also love the sudden thought that comes to her as she's talking to these women, and um, it suddenly dawns on her, wait a minute, have any of the black sisters that you've uncovered, were they sitters? Did they vote to depose Siuan? Then that was totally unlawful. because it was done with the bare minimum. So if even one sitter was black, what have you done? But ultimately, where it all leads to, the end here on page 210, is uh another great example of leadership, because she's not afraid to call out, to point out and rebuke something that is wrong, but she also takes responsibility on herself. um that, you know, uh blah, blah, where was it? Oh, I can't find the exact quote, but basically she admits we're all serving the dark here.
It's
Yeah.
bottom of 209 to 210.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, uh that's where it was. um
In the
surely you're not.
hardcover, I should specify.
Yeah, surely you're not saying that you think we serve the black in raising a Elida. Dosine said, I think we all are serving the interests of the shadow, Egwene said, so long as we allow ourselves to remain divided. How do you imagine the black reacted to the near secret deposing of an Amarillan seat, followed by a division among the Aes Sedai? I would not be surprised to find, after some investigation, that this nameless black sister you discovered was not the only dark friend among the group who worked to unseat the rightful Amarillan. And she continues with that of, you know, I know you don't accept my authority, but my Donnie does, and what you're doing here is valuable. So I charge you to continue helping them because this is important. You know, she's putting action behind her words of uh we all have culpability here and we all need to work to fix this, and she's actually doing something about it. And um it, again, the leadership motifs, and this moment in particular made me think of Lincoln and Churchill. Because there's a, I don't remember when he said it, but Lincoln said, you know, a there was a good deal on both sides of the Civil War of, um, you know, we're doing God's work. And I don't remember the exact quote, but paraphrasing Lincoln, um, both sides say that God is on their side. One side must be wrong because God cannot be both for and against something. But both sides could be wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and we will not know until the end. So he's making the point that let's not be so quick to assume that we're totally righteous here, because we are
Well,
killing our fellow countrymen. We are brother against brother, father against son here.
for that example, I'd put there's a third option. Both sides could be right.
In their own way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this thing is bad and evil, but
Mm-hmm.
states' rights
Mm-hmm.
should be respected. They're both right, but at the same time, one has a very huge consequence to it, and now we're picking between they always say choose between two evils. Well, sometimes you're choosing between two correct things, but one is more correct. It's like pick the most right answer in this question
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Um, and then I think I mentioned this to you over the weekend, but for anyone who hasn't seen the movie Darkest Hour, it's available on Netflix right now, and it's Gary Oldman as Churchill. And there's some annoying historical things in there that I might rant about at some point later if I feel like it. But otherwise, it's a really good movie in showing what Churchill had to do to rally, um, not so much the people, but his own cabinet, his own party that wanted, all right, well, France is about to fall. we're about to lose our entire professional army. We need to negotiate with Hitler. And he makes the point several times of, at what point are you people going to learn? We've been playing this game with the Bavarian corporal for years, and he just keeps taking more and more and more. He just keeps getting more and more aggressive. At what point are we going to actually stand up and take action rather than doing this silly dance over and over? So it's another great moment of of a leader standing up to his own people and calling them out for nonsense and doing something wrong. Uh,
Are we
do you
gonna
have
are
any
we
other
gonna
thoughts on that before we have to go to chapter 13?
I want to stall, but that would be avoidance, you know. Uh, we could probably talk for an hour on respecting your opponent or whatever with our conversation about Siviana, but
Yeah, yeah,
but we'll save that for what ultimately happens with Sylviana, I guess.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
let if I've got to do Gawyn, let me take a bathroom break first. I need to be as not distracted as possible too.
I'll resist pouring a drink and falling asleep.
All right, little hiccup, and we'll be back in half a second.
All right, so sharp contrast between Egwene being smart and a good leader, thinking things through, making rational decisions, and then Doofus McDummy here. And I hope it wasn't too much of an insult to say that I think Gawyn was one of those characters that Sanderson really got, because
I don't think it is because he's a little full of himself. He needs to be taken down a notch.
yeah, a little bit, but it's a very well written chapter. If the subject matter isn't very pleasant to read, because uh, this whole character arc for Gawyn, and then especially for Gawyn and Egwene, is just really annoying. As we'll get into more when we kind of reach the culmination of it, where it is just really lets down. But um, as far as just technically, it's very well written. You know, he makes Gawyn more sympathetic than he's been in a very long time. Um, but then there's still the problem, and this, we've wondered aloud before, what the heck were the notes for Gawyn, and where was Jordan planning on going here? Because as well as Gawyn the character is written, there's still some glaring contradictions um, that happen here, and I just wonder how much of that was intentional, and what was the resolution supposed to be, or was Jordan's intention for us to not like Gawyn? Because if so, congratulations, that's you really nailed that one. Um, but uh, we 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 start with him just reminding us, yeah, he's a great swordsman. We get introduced to a new character here, um, who's nifty, Sleet, that is it's it's a little clumsy, and this to me is more of a Sanderson thing, I think, because Jordan is usually better at introducing new characters as fully formed human beings, and Sleet seems a little too much of a contrivance.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's the word I was going to use. Yeah.
yeah, because all of a sudden here's this guy, and he is just the kind of personality that Gawyn needs to talk to think out loud, and to have a bit of mentorship from, at just the right moment. So it's a bit of a contrivance, um, but at least it starts him on this journey of something that has been, you know, gnawing at him, and I don't think it was ever really well fleshed out by Jordan, and I mean we'll see how well we think it gets resolved when we get there, but um the idea that he was the one to kill Hamar, that he killed his own instructor,
Mm-hmm.
and um you know Sleep makes the point, I knew him well, and he would not have thought less of you for what you did. You did what you thought was right. He did what he thought was right. And I think so. I don't remember if it's here in this first interaction or at the end of the chapter. Sleep makes the point that no one made any good decisions that day. Which, yeah, that happens, and that's basically back to something we've referenced before, which was Brian making that point to Egwene of, whether it's a siege and people die of starvation or we assault the tower now, people are going to die. It's just a matter of when and how much. It's not going to end pretty.
Well, and one of my themes for this book, as we talk through it, is there's repeated stories because we just got this with Tam and Perrin,
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, with Brian and Egwene, and you just going forward, it's repeated stories. This is the same lesson that Tam just tried to give to Perrin, and we're getting the same childish reaction from it.
Mm-hmm. More so, even
Yeah.
really. Um, and because so on page 221,
Which is something I wanted to bring up in that chapter and I forgot. I would have much rather that had been Elias than Tam, but
hmm,
you, we get a double dose of Tam with Rand later, but that probably was Elias's place.
yeah, because of how it played out,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was probably more of Elias's place. Um, if it had played out more the way we were, fanficking it, then Tam works.
Elias
Um,
is the closest thing to a father parent has,
yeah,
and the
especially now.
combination of him and Hopper is
Mhm.
like the ultimate dad in his progression.
Yeah. Um, so finally, after all the dealing with Gawyn, on the bottom of page 21, we finally have some self-awareness here, which is he's we know he's been getting frustrated with the Aes Sedai, and then he gets rebuffed by them, and they're just straight up rude and pretty much just threaten him. And so that kind of sends him over the edge of thinking about what the hell am I doing here? And down at the bottom here, he had supported Elida in the rebellion not because he liked her. She'd always been cold during her years acting as his mother's advisor. No, he'd supported her because he disliked Siuan's treatment of his sister and Egwene. Finally, some self-awareness. But would Elida have treated the girls any better? Would any of them have? Gawyn had made his decision in a moment of passion. It hadn't been the cool-headed act of loyalty that his men assumed. Where was his loyalty then? Yay, finally. Here's the problem. 2 pages later, on page 223, when he finds out that Egwene is the Saladar, the rebel Emerillin, and that she's captured and inside the tower, and he starts going full Perrin here and freaking out about what is happening to her and what is going to happen to her, and he immediately gets emotional. And he's even thinking as he's acting, as he's doing things, as he's planning, he's shocked. He's glad his voice is so calm, his movements are so calm, and that they can't hear the pounding of his heart and they can't hear the racing of his thoughts, as he's getting ready to leave. Uh, but he's still acting totally emotionally. Dum dum. Ah.
He's young, dumb, and full of cum, my friend.
Yep. Um. I just I don't remember this. I don't remember liking what comes next, but I will hope that the way it ends here, the way this chapter ends, this feels like it should be a setup for something, a setup for Gawyn to finally have a resolution. So when he gets where he's going, um, later in this book, I don't think it's next. Yes, later in this book. Um, we'll see how it actually happens. But so he has this interaction with Sleet, who is not fooled by what Gawyn is doing, and Gawyn makes, and and Gawyn asks him, "So why aren't you stopping me?" Uh, and Sleet answers on 226, "Perhaps I just like to see men care. Perhaps I hope you'll find a way to help in this. Perhaps I'm feeling lazy and sore with a bruised spirit from so many defeats. May you find what you seek, young Trackend." If Sleet is supposed to be a mentor figure, that should be a nugget of thought to go along with his self-realization of I acted on emotion rather than cool-headed thinking, and look where it got me.
Well, and this is where Sanderson is not like Jordan. Sanderson is more like a modern writer. It's about the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the progression and development into the overall picture. It's about the he if he was a painter, his figures would be perfect. They would be drawn perfectly, but the city scene would look discombobulated all over the place. It would be a mismatch, a mishmash of all kinds of different things that just were all put together, but they were beautifully done in the detail.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think that's a good way to sum up what I remember of Gawyn's story going forward, of the Gawyn chapters here going forward. Is It's a lot of scenes.
Hmm.
All right. Well,
Well, and
that
his
is,
writing style plays to that too, because as we go forward, and then it's like this character, this character, this character, this character, this character, and it's like a parallel. He'll try to like Matt, and I forget who he parallels with there, but they're going side to side when Matt goes
yeah.
into the tower and it's like one scene to the next, to the next, to the next, and back to this one. And they're supposed to be happening at the same time. That's kind of where he kind of progresses to. So this is the transition book. I have a feeling this one
Mm,
has the most integration with the notes, and then Sanderson takes more free license going forward because the style slowly changes to that later style.
yeah. Yeah. We'll see more of that going forward. Um, oh, we made good progress, but holy cow, this is a big book.
Yeah.
So we'll see how long it
Oh,
takes to get there.
for what?
But
Somewhere between 25% and a third through.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
But again, as I commented, I think the last time, this constant switching of perspectives makes it harder to push too many chapters at once because there's you're trying to address the whole storyline in the conversation. And if that storyline is 4 chapters in a row, you cover 4 chapters.
Hmm.
But we tried to address 4 different storylines here.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, did we have any spoiler things?
I didn't really
Um,
I didn't
I
really
think,
pick up
I,
any.
yeah,
What was the one from the comment? Hold on, let me look back at that.
I mentioned a few, but those were, you know,
Oh,
read and find out because we're gonna
yeah.
get there soon. So
Okay,
we
so
can
spoiler
save those for
alert, blah
that.
blah blah. This from the comments. Lanfear doesn't die in the doorway realm. Morden comes and kills her, so the Dark One can resurrect her. I don't know if I agree with that, unless we do we get a perspective where Morden does kill her or thinks that he did, because he would be subject to the same rules inside that place as she is.
Yeah.
That's the
You know
that's the
what?
thing about the Elfin and Aelfin world is channelers don't have an
No.
advantage.
Yeah. Who that does ring a bell though, that Morden did go in to get her. But I was thinking that in the deal to get her out, it involved her dying. I was thinking that was part of the deal,
Okay,
not
so
that
we'll
Morden
keep an
killed her.
yeah,
But
we'll keep an
but
eye out for that.
yeah, we we do get a Sindane perspective later that explains it, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Morden in that realm would be just as hamstrung as everybody else. The reason Matt and Tom and
Well, except
Farstrider succeed is because they cheat, right?
right,
Eh,
but Ishi is such an abstract thinker. He's the philosopher that he would more easily be able to relate to these alien beings and be able to deal with them on their own terms, conceivably.
mhm.
Because it would be really hard for anyone else to put themselves in the snakes or foxes shoes because they're just so alien. They're so
Mhm.
very weird and very different.
And it couldn't be Shidar Heron because I think he would die on the just going through the doorway.
Because it doesn't exist.
Well, and they can't exist in the world of dreams other than as a dream.
Yeah. Yeah. And that place exists in a very weird and nebulous place that I don't know that we're ever really given a very good answer
Now that
for
I'm
on
thinking
what
about
it
it, do
is.
we ever get closure on what happens to Shidar Heron?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. So does he
Yeah.
just disappear?
It's a good question. We'll have to keep an eye out. I don't remember what
Because that
happens
would
to him.
that could have been the good battle for Lan. That could have been the great one for him.
There you go.
The
Yeah.
ultimate Murdral versus the ultimate Warder would have been a good
Yeah.
ending. Yeah.
There you go. There's there's some what ifs. All right. Well, that's all we got for now. We will see y'all next week for who the heck knows what. The end of the world, probably.
Well, I'm actually really happy with our last social episodes. So, maybe it was a good thing to kind of slide away from politics for the most part
Hmm.
uh for a little bit. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, there's so much going on that who knows. I
All
did
right.
watch
Well,
Thomas Massey on Tim Pool's in real life
yeah.
last night, and he's a funny dude. He's an interesting guy. One of my favorite congressmen going through just his voting record,
Hmm.
and now to see him in person was actually which was a breath of fresh air. So Trump, if you're watching, there's a VP candidate for you right there.
Yep. Yep. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it ain't
All
gonna
right.
happen.
Who knows what we'll talk about Monday, but I'm sure it'll be, or Wednesday, but I'm
Wednesday.
sure it'll be something.
Yeah, Monday. No, I've got
Yeah. Definitely not that.
school stuff Monday.
All right.
Later.